Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the GM. It is your guy Boulanger, and up next on the GM, Ravens versus Niners post game reaction. Do me a quick favor, hit like. If it is your first time checking out the GM, hit subscribe. Also, hit the notification bell so that you get updates when we upload new content. Let's talk about it. Man, I'm back, man. Been battling the flu, so please forgive me for not being connected with you guys late last week. But hey, got a big time Christmas gift last night. I know you guys are excited about it. I'm super excited about it, man. So let's talk about this game, right? So what do we see from the Baltimore Ravens last night? Well, let me give you five defensive things I recognized or I want to make note of, and then I'll give you five offensive things. Number one, defensively, this is no order. Number one, defensively, I thought that this team played enthused. Okay. Um, they had like another gear that they were in last night. It was as if, let's say, the 49ers were 75 on the highway, we were driving 100 on the highway, right? It was like we were always a step ahead of them. And I don't think that had anything to do with coaching. I just think that had to do with the players, man. I think that this team is getting healthy, and being healthy is something that is going to be integral as we keep making progress in this season. I think that being healthy allows you to learn who you're playing with. I think it allows the Baltimore Ravens to know how a player plays, know where a player is going to be, and be able to count on that guy being there, right place, right time. That's the first thing I noticed. Second thing I noticed from the defense is that um, they were rallying to the ball even more than they usually do, right? You know, I mentioned in a couple of videos how they didn't play downhill. They didn't seem to play smash my football, but that was back last night. And I think that was part of the reason why you saw a lot of assisted interceptions, whether it was the tip ball that Cal Hamilton caught, the Marlon Humphrey interception, uh, and I think there was another interception that was tipped. Also, I can't remember who tipped it, but you saw them, just kind of getting to the ball and being in right place, right time, man. It was really exciting to see the Baltimore Ravens play up a level versus down a level. And that's the one thing I can say about the Ravens. This year, when we faced big time competition or what was supposed to be big time competition, we seemed to step our game up. And so super excited, man, to see what we saw from the Ravens last night. The third thing I noticed, right? Um, Mike McDaniel has coached himself out of the Ravens. I think that not Mike McDaniel. What is McDonald? I can't ever get that man's name right. It's Mike McDonald or McDaniel, whatever. He's coached himself out of the Ravens. Somebody's coming to get him. They're going to pay him big money to be their head coach. Because when you put your defense on the field against the quote unquote unbeatable 49ers, the unstoppable offense, the mad genius of an offensive coordinator, head coach, and Kyle Shanahan, when you put your defense on the field and they show up and do what they did last night with all of the football world looking at this game, every owner who needs a head coach is now looking at Mike McDonald. I think that's his name, as the new head coach for their team. And hats off to RDC. Hats off to him for doing a great job with game planning. In fact, that was going to be one of my keys to victory is how he actually laid out this defense where Darby was going to be a starting corner, Brandon Stevens, and put Marlon Humphrey in the slot, and and then go with the two safety look a little bit more. And it paid off, man. So hats off, man. Great coaching, great scheme um, for the Baltimore Ravens defense. A fourth thing I noticed from this game is um, that our secondary is a collection of good talent that accentuates one another. That's what I was That's what the pause was about, trying to think about how to say it. Here's what I mean. Marlon Humphrey is no longer the $100 million cornerback that they paid him to be several years ago, but he's a good corner. Ronald Darby is not the guy he once was 4 or 5 years ago, but he's an above average corner. Brandon Stevens may not even be the shutdown cover guy that he's shown himself to be this year. Because I think it needs to be more than 1 year that's proven. But all three guys together, learning from one another, trusting that each other are going to be in the right place at the right time, has one, I think, challenged each other to up their game to consistency, but I think also has allowed them to set a performance level that they're all striving to reach. That's what you saw last night. You saw them kind of competing with one another, but competing against one another to be where they needed to be at the right time. Our safeties, Marcus Williams, Geno Stone, which I didn't see or hear much of last night, and also Kyle Hamilton, they've done a good job being where they needed to be. Right place, right time, making tackles, knocking away the balls, interceptions over the last several weeks, and it showed up again last night. And I think that because they're all bringing a level of consistency right now, it's not only playing with one another, it's now competing against one another, like who can outperform the other. And I think that's healthy competition. That's just another thing that I noticed last night. The fifth thing I noticed last night defensively is that even when a play didn't go their way, like the Christian McCaffrey 40-yard touchdown, like the Brandon Ayuk catching a couple of big time third down conversions, like the George Kittle's 58-yard catch and run, and then he had another big time catch. They didn't let go of the rope. They just kept on plugging away, and they would bring the hammer when you caught the ball. That's another thing that I really appreciated about the Ravens. They didn't do that silly arm tackling like they had been doing a couple of games this year. There was a couple of times where Marlon Humphrey was bringing the wood, and like Debo Samuels would bounce off and keep running. Excuse me. But I think that you know, for the most part, we played downhill, we played smash mouth, and I don't think the 49ers are used to that kind of violence. I think they're used to being the aggressor, right? And if I'm honest, I'm gonna tell you something that I was gonna say in my keys to victory. The 49ers are not bullies. Let me say this before I get to offense. They're not bullies. What the 49ers were doing that made them look unbeatable was they were out executing other teams. That's what they were doing. The 49ers are not a downhill run team. Christian McCaffrey's not a downhill runner. The plays he made last night, they weren't downhill runs. They were just good executed plays, which is what you're supposed to do. But what would happen when other teams would be getting blowed out by the 49ers would start executing with a level of consistency. And then when your offense falters, you give them the ball back, they score again. Now you have to abandon the very thing that you've been built on all year long. And I think that our defense allowed us to stay with our plan offensively. They played well enough to stay with our plan defensively, and and we out executed the 49ers, which was a real key to victory. Let's jump to the offensive side of the ball. Five things offensively. The first thing that I want to say is the offensive line played outstanding. Yes, there were some breakdowns, but out of how many ever plays we ran offensively, our offensive line played outstanding. There was a lot of times where Lamar Jackson had plenty of time to stand back there and survey the field. So I want to give a shout out, man, to our offensive line for handling their business. See, because the talk was this 49ers defense, man, it's unstoppable. And they get to the quarterback. And we got a couple they got a couple of sacks on us. But we did not allow Nick Bosa to wreck the game by himself. We did not allow Hartgrave to wreck the game. And we did not allow Fred Warner to wreck the game. So shout out to our offensive line. Okay. The second thing I noticed is that we caught the ball when it was time to catch the ball. Here's what I mean by that. There's been times this year where balls have been dropped, balls would carry them off receivers' hands and get intercepted. But when the ball touched the receiver's hands, for the most part tonight, we brought it in, made the play, and moved forward. And that shows progress and that shows growth. And I also want to give a shout out specifically to Zay Flowers for getting up off the mat. He had a down 3 or 4 game stretch, getting up off the mat and balling last night. That's the second thing I noticed offensively. The third thing I noticed offensively is that um, the game plan, now that I'm seeing it more clearly, is to call the play, but then allow Lamar Jackson to dictate the play. I don't mean dictate the play like to audible it. I mean dictate the play as in how long that play lasts. Because there was a lot of times last night where you saw a play unfold for the Baltimore Ravens that Lamar Jackson would extend and would extend some more, and then he would make the throw when the time was right. And I heard the broadcasters talk about it in the context of 2 plays in one, meaning there's the play that's called, and then there's the play that Lamar Jackson dictates or creates. And so I do appreciate that. And I saw a lot of that. I saw Lamar Jackson control this game uh, uh, in a really elite level way. The last two things that I noticed are going to be specifically Lamar Jackson. The four, Lamar Jackson was able to overcome, I believe, some first quarter anxiousness. I think you saw him be a little too amped, a little too anxious, which is probably what played a part in missing the pass to, I believe that was to Nelson Aguilar, or which could have turned a punt into a first down, a punt, opportunity for first down into a punting situation. I think he was a little too amped up when he missed Zay Flowers, who was running open in the middle of the field. And I think he was too anxious to make a play when um, he ended up in the end zone, tripping over the referee, and ended up giving away 2 points offensively. After that play, you watched him settle down and dominate this 49ers um, defense. And I do mean dominate. And I'm going to call it domination because the whole sports world talked about the Ravens in a context of not really belonging on the field with the 49ers. When the 5.5 point spread came out, you heard lots of people saying, oh, they should be double digit underdogs and so on and so forth. So the whole sports world did not believe that the Baltimore Ravens belonged on the same field with the 49ers. And and so for Lamar to settle in and prove this Ravens offense and team worthy of competing and dominating and earning this victory, that's a big time deal. And the final thing I noticed offensively is this: Lamar Jackson should be the MVP. And I'm not a homer, and I'm not jumping on a bandwagon. In fact, you guys have asked me a couple of different times, and I've talked about the MVP at least 3 times in videos over the last 2 months. And I did not believe he could get into the MVP race. because traditionally the MVP race is about statistics. One of those statistics is wins and losses. Another is, because it typically goes to a quarterback. Another is passing yards and touchdowns and all those kind of things. And I knew that Lamar Jackson wouldn't have the touchdowns based on where we were at week 10 and then at week 13, that kind of thing. But this is a funny kind of year because I don't think it's just going to be about stats this year. I think it's going to be about impact. I think that those who are going to judge and vote for the MVP, they're going to look at impact a little different this year. You see, because the guy who has the numbers is Tua, but he's not really considered to be one of the top three candidates up until last night or up through last night. And I think that this is one of the first years that other positions could win the MVP. You know, you've heard Tyreek Hill talk, you've heard Christian McCaffrey talk, and then of course Brock Purdy was supposed to be the leader last night. But I think that when you put it in this context, if the MVP leader last night would have been Brock Purdy going into the game, Lamar number 2, and Christian McCaffrey number 3, then what that means is Lamar Jackson would have dominated a team with 2 MVP candidates. Now that's what that would mean. And 2 is always bigger than 1. And our 1 was dominant. Now stay tuned. Stay tuned for my 12 reasons why Lamar Jackson should be the MVP. That'll come up either later today, depending on how I feel, or tomorrow. But I think that he showed that last night. He controlled this game after he gained composure. He controlled this game from midways of the first midways of the first to beginning of the second quarter through the middle of the fourth quarter. And I think that he, of course, surpassed Brock Purdy. I think he leaped over, and I think he put some distance between him and McCaffrey, because wins and losses matter, and how you win matters. So I don't want to hear this, oh, Christian McCaffrey had 100 yards. He had a good game. Well, they lost, and they lost big. And it really wasn't as close as what the scoreboard says, because we really only allowed 17 points to the 49ers. And if we're all the way honest, when they scored the last touchdown to give them 19 points, meaning the 49ers, it was kind of in an early garbage time. We were playing garbage time defense. We were playing more of a prevent defense from the 10 minute mark of the fourth quarter through the end of the game, which is what allowed them to, get those big passes and so on and so forth. So it really wasn't that close, even with McCaffrey having 100 yards. So please just stop with that silliness. But so just know, I am keeping receipts. I don't really watch a lot of sports shows until they say something stupid, but I'm going to specifically watch First Take today. I'm going to watch Speak for Yourself today, because I want to hear what they have to say, because it was some of these shows who would not allow Lamar Jackson an opportunity to win the MVP. I didn't think he would win, because I thought it would be purely a stats thing, which it has been for the last 2 decades. But I think this year they're going to really take a fine look at impact. And when you look at impact, there's no greater impact than what Lamar Jackson has on the Ravens. And one thing that's clear, whether it was Purdy, whether it was McCaffrey, whether it was Fred Warner, whether it was Nick Bosa, or whether it was Lamar Jackson, when you take all the top players from this game, it's very, very apparent who the best player was on that team. On that field, excuse me. I'm your guy Boulanger. This is the GM, and we're out.